All right, so the chapter begins with Eisner talking about, well, what exactly are objectives? So here's a quote from page 93. Quote, "Objectives are the specific goals that one hopes to achieve through the educational program that is provided. In order for educational planning to be meaningful, not only must goals be formulated, they must also be formulated with precision and with clarity. To formulate them with precision and clarity, it is best not to use words that have reference that are difficult to observe. Words such as understanding, insight, appreciation, and interest refer to qualities that cannot be observed directly. They require one to make inferences about their existence through the observation of manifest behavior. Thus, useful objectives should be stated in behavioral terms or, in more current jargon, performance terms. When objectives are stated behaviorally, it is possible to have specific empirical reference to observe. Thus, one is in a position to know without ambiguity whether the behavioral objectives has been reached. An objective that seeks to help students appreciate the insights of great poetry needs to be recast into terms far more specific and precise. What would a student do to demonstrate that such appreciation has occurred? What behavior could he or she display? What task is he or she to perform?" End quote. I don't know about you, but that kind of reminds me a lot of the PD sessions that I'd go to on Wednesday afternoons on our early release days where they'd kind of talk about what is an objective. You probably learned this in your 101 course on education, but we're going to teach it to you again to make sure that you understand what it is. Which, side note on that, I think it's hilarious when districts treat everybody the same. Like when I went back into the previous district that I was in, I had just finished my residency for my PhD in music education, and they required me to go to the new teacher orientation it was supposed to be a year long, and it would teach you stuff like, well, what is an objective? Blah, blah, blah. And every teacher had to go to it if you were a new teacher in that district. But fortunately, I was teaching a college class at the exact same time that this occurred, and I had already committed to that before I'd signed on for the district. So I went to the first and I think the last one, and that was about it. I understand why districts have those kind of courses in place, but it kind of comes across as assuming teachers come in not knowing what they're talking about. Just because it's your first year in the district doesn't mean you haven't taught several years before or have many degrees in that subject area. But tangent over. Now, Eisner goes on to describe how these objectives are no longer focused on what the teacher is going to do, but the behavior of the student. So what exactly will the student do? Not only do you identify the behavior, but you also identify the content that students are going to engage with. And then finally, you need to include some kind of degree of competency that somebody is going to reach when completing the objective. So here's a quote from page 94, and this is actually Eisner quoting Robert Major, or Mager. Apologies for mispronouncing your name. Quote, "An objective is an intent communicated by a statement describing a proposed change in a learner. A statement of what the learner is to be like when he has successfully completed a learning experience. It is a description of a pattern of behavior, performance, we want the learner to be able to demonstrate. As Dr. Paul Whitmore once put it, the statement of objectives of a training program must denote measurable attributes observable in the graduate of the program, or otherwise it is impossible to determine whether or not the program is meeting the objectives. When clearly defined goals are lacking, it is impossible to evaluate a course or program efficiently, and there is no sound basis for selecting appropriate materials, content, or instructional methods. After all, the machinist does not select a tool until he knows what operation he intends to perform. Neither does a composer orchestrate a score until he knows what effects he wishes to achieve. Similarly, a builder does not select his materials or simply a schedule for construction until he has his blueprints, objectives, before him. Too often, however, one hears teachers arguing the relative merits of textbooks or other aids of the classroom versus the laboratory, without ever specifying just what goal the aid or method is to assist in achieving. I cannot emphasize too strongly the point that an instructor will function in a fog of his own making until he knows just what he wants his students to be able to do at the end of the instruction." End quote. Then actually went over from page 94 into the very top of page 95. Now, that is a really interesting quote, and I have so much to say and counter with that, but I'm going to just kind of keep my mouth shut, and we'll let Eisner do that for me.